Hey everybody, it's Philip at Scoring Notes and the Scoring Notes website and podcast, and I'm at the 2025 NAMM show, and once again, I have the great pleasure of speaking with my friend Sam Butler from Avid and Sibelius,
Hi,
and great to see you, Sam.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to see you, and first of all, I just want to ask you how the NAMM show has gone for you so far.
It's been busy. It's been really fun. We've had a great year. We are showing off everything that we've released in the last 12 months.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, ever, really. But specifically the last 12 months.
Right.
And also what is about to be released. So depending on when this airs, there's a nice new update for Sibelius that we're showing on the booth, and we've had great reception. And that's across desktop, but also on mobile as well. We've got some exciting things there.
Actually, speaking of mobile, I know we want to talk about some of the new features that are coming for 2025. But first of all, let's take a moment, and we have in front of us here, if you want to bring it into the camera, a very nice award that you and your team received just a couple of nights ago here at NAMM. Do you want to tell us all about that?
Yeah, it was great fun. Very unexpected, very exciting.
Yeah.
Completely honoured to get this tech award. So a tech award is for the Technical Excellence and Creativity Awards.
Excellent.
And we were...
Can I hold it?
Oh, of course you can.
Oh,
yeah.
wow. Thank you.
And we were in the audio apps and hardware peripherals for smartphones and tablets.
Excellent.
So there was quite a gamut of nominees, and thanks to it was a public vote, so our users obviously appreciate what we've done, and it's great, and it's very validating to get this publicly voted award for Sibelius on mobile. We specifically entered the Android app, which we released in June, and it's been very well received. The app is now on over 1 million devices, and we're pretty pleased with the growth that we've had since releasing Sibelius on iOS in 2021.
1 million devices, that's incredible. And I know it was a huge technical achievement for you and the team. So I think that it's really, really special. You should really take a lot of pride in having that recognized here amidst all the many, many technological achievements that are on display here. So congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was a great testament to the team's work. They do all the hard work, all the developing and figuring out how on earth to get Sibelius and a AI neural net to run on a phone that may or may not have a functioning version of Android running on it.
That's incredible.
It's an amazing achievement to get Sibelius running, and and it can open any size score, and it can play back, and you can edit and print and all sorts of things. So,
that's awesome. Great. Well, for that team, it's like kind of like the Stanley Cup. If you in hockey, if you take that around, and I understand that every member of the team gets to spend a day or overnight with it and take it to their home, drink champagne out of it or whatever. So I think you should. I think you should take that trophy and send it around the world where all your team.
Yeah, I certainly need to try and find space in my suitcase. I don't know really how it comes in quite a big box.
Yeah. Good luck explaining that to customs, but we'll deal with that later. But let's get to, before we get to the new features, which I know you're eager to talk about, let's actually talk a little bit more about what happened this past year with the mobile and other things. And I want to get your reaction to my observation, if you will. It seemed like last year the focus was on the support structure around Sibelius, if you will. And I'm thinking about highlights, certainly the Android Chromebook release that you just mentioned, copy and paste of MIDI between Sibelius and Pro Tools, or any application that supports the MIDI clipboard. Both of those were actually previewed here at NAMM last year, 2024. And bringing even more desktop features to that mobile app to bring more parity between the two, desktop and mobile, making Sibelius Apple Silicon native, and better Music XML support, I should say. But the way of working in Sibelius hasn't changed too much in the past year, to my understanding of it. But I feel that in this year, coming year, if your NAMM preview is any guide, we're in for some feature updates to the core Sibelius music preparation experience. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, it is. We always try and have a balance of keeping everything going to making sure that it supports the latest hardware on both Windows and Mac, and now mobile as well.
Right.
So there's an element of technical infrastructure that we've just got to keep up to date.
Yeah.
Native silicon was something that we all knew we had to do. There's a ticking clock for when Apple are going to remove Rosetta. They haven't announced it as of yet, but we knew that we needed to get there. It didn't take us long. It wasn't as though we were working on it for 2 years and it took us a long time to get it out.
Right.
We just worked on it and then it was out.
Right.
It took really sort of, I don't know, it felt like about a month. It was not a lot of work really. And the core of Sibelius just worked. It was all the sort of surrounding, supporting extra bits that we need to port over.
And even running Sibelius on the Rosetta was still a very fast experience. It was just the fact that if you wanted to use plugins and other things, and like you said, eventually Apple's going to pull support for it, so you have to update long term.
And Rosetta, Apple made an incredible achievement doing Rosetta 2. Sibelius just ran. We didn't need to make any lines of code changes to support Rosetta, which is both a testament to the work that we put into Sibelius to modernize it, but also Apple's achievement as well.
Sure.
And then, there was a bit of pressure from new plugins coming out that we weren't supporting, so we did it, but we've done it in a way that still supports old Intel-based plugins and native running in Sibelius, which is, it's quite fun. So you can have both. Obviously, when time comes and you've got one of these nice Macs with a silicon chip, you're going to need to retire the Intel plugins. So it's always good to get ahead of that.
Yeah.
But I think everybody's pretty much made the leap now.
Yeah.
Only old ones that maybe sort of end of life already won't get updated. But so we're pleased with that.
I imagine it's always a balance between keeping up those complementary technology with all the different software and hardware that you need to support Sibelius and introducing new features. But even just keeping up to date with the complementary technology is really useful. Have you heard anything specifically about the response to some of those types of improvements?
Which one? Sort of outside silicon?
Yeah, just like, performance. Somebody upgrades from their 2015, iMac to a M4 chip or something. Yeah,
night and day. If you haven't tried Sibelius on a silicon machine or one of the newer Windows machines,
right,
it's phenomenally fast.
Yeah.
There's an awful lot that you can throw at Sibelius, and it's quite hard to get it to choke. And these machines, the actual core of running regular size scores compared to Rosetta is quite unnoticeable because everything's sort of running in proc already. But when it's sort of startup time or loading sounds or things that are quite intensive that are really fast. I can't remember what the stats are. It's like 25 or 30% faster when starting up or something like that. But when you've got massive scores, that's when you can notice the difference. It's much faster with huge scores because it's just much more powerful machine to be able to crunch that. Yeah,
and that's always been the case with Sibelius. Back even from the early days, it was able to support a huge number of staves, virtually unlimited, and performance was always something that I know that you take very seriously because, look, let's face it, those of us that are using the software often are doing it in a time-sensitive situation, pressure, whether we're cranking music out or trying to meet a deadline or just wanting to not lose that creative thread. And when you're just waiting for the software to catch up with your rapid musical thoughts, that can actually be an impediment to the creative process. So I know that's something that you take very seriously as well.
Yeah, and we really do take it seriously. We never want to introduce something that would slow that process down. And we appreciate, composers will just be working on fairly small scale projects sometimes, and they just put in the notes in, then it goes to an orchestrator and copy it, and they then make it huge scores. Sure. And their deadline is a few days.
Yeah.
So we heard recently that Bridget Jones came in and they orchestrated and did the copying of parts in a day for a whole movie. So and Sibelius can keep up.
I don't encourage that, by the way. But no, I don't condone that.
But
it is the reality.
Or TV shows, and they're given a week to notice of recording session. Yeah. But the parts don't come in until 3 days before, and they want to do a rehearsal, and then it's bonkers. It's bonkers. The time crunches. But they say that Sibelius keeps up and they can automate what they need to, and it allows them then to meet the deadlines because they're using Sibelius.
Yeah, that's great. Well, let's talk about actually in that vein, what we can do to improve the parts creation process, and this lends itself to our discussion about the new features that I know are already publicly announced and on preview on display here at NAMM. And this is the new decondensing parts feature, and this really appears to be part of a long trajectory. And I know many users have been clamoring for such a feature for a number of years. So, what is the approach that you've taken, and what's special about the way Sibelius tackles this? I know, actually, not to pregame your answer, but I know the performance element is one consideration there for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So we wanted to tackle this problem in a way that didn't affect any of the performance, as in the way you use the application. You still use Sibelius in exactly the same way. If you want to use the feature, you turn it on, and then most of the time it could be you just turn it on and it's done. But then we give you complete control over everything.
Right.
So it works in a way where you have a stave in the full score that is for two instruments. Sorry, two players on one instrument.
Right.
And it's common that you won't just print out that part that we generate through dynamic parts. The rhythms are too convoluted, and it's just so much easier, especially these time crunch short recording sessions. You can't be then figuring out who's playing what. You just have a part, these your notes, go. So we've allowed it to happen with one click, and you select a bar of the instrument, click a button, and the parts appear in front of you. And what it does is build upon what we've been creating and releasing for the last few years. I think the most notable one was halfway through 2023.
23.5, yeah.
Yeah, when we allowed individual notes in a chord to be hidden.
Yeah.
That in itself was never possible. As soon as you hit one, it hit the whole chord. So we had to pull that apart. So you could manually filter all the notes in player one, hide them, go to the other part, do the same for player two. And then you've got to rename the parts, and then you've got any change that you then make. If you move the bottom note up to above the other one, you then need to make sure that you unhid it and then hid it in the other one. It just all of that sort of manual fine tuning. Anyway, it made it possible, but now we automate the entire thing. So when there's these new staff filters over each of the parts, and they appear over the music when you need them to, and they get out the way when you deselect them. So they're only really visible when you need to see them, which is quite an important consideration we had to make. And it automatically hides the music that isn't needed for that instrument.
Right.
It lets through cues, so anything cue sides will just come through. So if you spent time putting cues in the score, and hidden them, they just appear in both parts.
Right.
It might be that you want a cue appearing in one part and not the other, but of course we give you complete full reign, so you can find the cue that you don't need and just hide it.
Yeah.
And then Sibelius will recalculate and redraw that notation, so if it becomes a full bar next to another one, it'll then show you a multi-rest. So you don't get lots of individual empty bars, so Sibelius can reformat the music all the time, and it does this without any performance hit whatsoever. So you can have a full, huge orchestral score, lots of doubling instruments, and lots of individual parts, all with star filters on it. And it just flies like it normally did before.
That's great. And I know it may be difficult if you're watching this video or listening to our podcast to visualize this. So a picture is worth 1,000 words. And of course, as Sam said, eventually this will actually be released to the public, and you'll be able to test it for yourself. If you haven't already by the time this is you're listening to this. But these are basically overlays on the music that are they're filters, but not in the way that we have often thought about filters in Sibelius. They've it's more along the lines of almost like a staff style. If you ever use those in Finale, to some extent you can apply it to the part but not the score, and the staff style does certain things and you can set it, and then you can have different settings in the filter to say I only want to filter voice 1 or voice 2 or player 1 and player 2, and there's some logic there, and you also have some definitions as well that it can realize, okay, I want solo, and then I want tutti, and then
so those are the text directives, as we've called them.
Yep.
So you can write the number 1 in technique text, and it will know that player 1 will play that. So until it receives a tutti or play or some other instruction to reset it, that music from then on will only appear in the player 1 part, and then player 2 will get a big old multi-rest. And then you type the word play, which you can hide. You can use the tilde just before the word play and it'll hide it. Or you can select and hide it. And then from that point onwards, both instruments will then receive those the note, whichever they're filtering through. So the star filters work not that they filter out things, they let things through. So you say this is a star filter for player 1, and it'll let through player one's notes.
Right.
And you can stack them as well. So if you've done, for whatever reason, you've added a cue for one player, but actually there were notes to play for the other one, you can hide the cue for player 1, say, and then you can add another star filter over the notes. It's a rather contrived example. Anyway, but you can then put another star filter to say, well, let through voice 2 and player 1. So you can have a combination of any notes. So if Sibelius is showing you too much, you can hide it. If it's not showing enough, you can put another filter on, just by a note or a bar or however long you need it for, and then that'll let through extra information as well.
Yeah.
So these are additive. And you can resize them and drag them around and copy and paste them, and they're fully flexible.
They're very flexible. Yeah. Is there a plan for further refinement here? Because I know that in a number of previous Sibelius releases, we've seen features introduced in like a phase 1 or almost like an MVP state, and then not to say that this is necessarily an MVP, minimum viable product state, because it is more than minimum, but then we see later phases rolled out in subsequent updates. So is that the way you're thinking about it?
There's always there's a chance that we've missed something, or we want to do refinement.
And as you said, I mean, this builds on some of the groundwork that was laid a year and a half ago.
It is solid. I mean, this isn't just a minimum version of what we wanted to do. This is very much a solid feature that is complete, and it's to spec. And we finished all the stories yesterday, and it was all a bit much. But yeah, the team have been really cranking it the last few weeks to get this done in time for next week's release. This evolves. This doesn't support everything that you might want to do in a part. It doesn't allow you to split out a single stave into 2 staves. So even if in a full score, if you try and do SATB combined and then you split them out to individual staves, and making that all work and filter through just the thing, that's going to be something that we need to build on later. Hopefully later this year we can get around to that sort of thing, and that'll unlock all sorts of amazing, wonderful capabilities that have never been possible without manual overrides, or having separate scores, or having, tons of extra staves and just showing the ones that you want. This would tidy all those sorts of workarounds that people have been using for the last couple of decades.
I mean, it gives you an appreciation of how complicated and complex the part creation process is, going way back to the dawn of music preparation, and music notation software really hasn't fully read our minds yet, but we're getting there, and it's really exciting to see. So we'll be excited to see where that goes. Congratulations to getting this far. I think a lot of users, customers would be very eager to play with it. But I want to, maybe just to change the subject a little in the time that we have left here, because there have been some industry changes in the last year, and our entire field got a jolt a few months ago when Make Music announced that they were sunsetting Finale. And I know you went on a bit of a listening tour in the fall specifically, reaching out to Finale users. And I was just wondering, how would you characterize the Sibelius response? What are you seeing from customers, and does that actually affect your plans and roadmap?
Yes, insofar as that we've gained thousands of users that we didn't have before.
Okay.
So we're really pleased with the response of the efforts that we made in our October release to improve Music XML import. So that wasn't on the roadmap for then. So we brought that forward, and we managed to pivot. our development practices allow for that. We are trying to be as agile as we can, and even though we know what we want to do next, generally, chances are something else might just come in and go, oh, okay, well, we're going to do that instead.
Yeah.
So we did that in October, met with hundreds of Finale users and gave them a demo and showed what Sibelius could do and how they can move their music over. And generally, they are PDFing everything from Finale. So they've got a hard copy of electronic, but it's a surefire sort of gold version of their music.
Right, a reference.
Yeah. And then they're importing the music into Sibelius, and then they're going from there. And we were doing that, so we got hundreds of scores from Finale users in Finale file format and the PDF.
Okay.
And we imported them, and we were measuring the margins and the page margins, staff margins, and objects and distances and placement and everything in Acrobat Reader. It's got a really cool little measuring tool.
There's a scoring notes post about that. Check that out.
And we were making sure that the values that were chosen in Sibelius were right. And it was something that in Finale you could have different page margins per page. So you couldn't just go, okay, well, page one is this. Maybe there's a title. Page two onwards is something else. We couldn't do that. So we had to make the fidelity of the music as good as possible. And the test that we did, just importing it into an older version of Sibelius, was just night and day. We've made such huge improvements.
That's great. I know a lot of Finale users are grateful for that as they try to find the next way forward. And even like I said with the staff, not to say it's necessarily the same as staff styles, but I think if you are familiar with Finale and its legendary flexibility and customizability, this new feature that you're announcing will feel familiar in that way, and that's good. But you're absolutely right. We can go down that whole rabbit hole of you can have a different staff size for every staff in Finale and every page and all that. And it's both amazingly It was both amazingly flexible and incredibly, it could trip up a lot of people if they weren't aware of that. But that aside, let's look forward, and I want to get your thoughts as we start to wrap up here. What are your thoughts, more generally speaking, about where music notation software, not just Sibelius, but the whole field is headed? And I'm talking both about the tech and the community of users.
Yeah, we're at a funny junction, I suppose, where there's been changes across the whole board. We were none of us, I don't think, were the same as where we were a year or two ago.
Yeah,
We're certainly keeping our head down and cracking on with our roadmap and listening to customers. And one of the impacts from Finale users coming on board is they've now got a bunch of feature requests for us that we didn't necessarily have on the roadmap before. We obviously still want to concentrate on the first time UX, as in what you see when you first run Sibelius, or what you see when you need to reactivate Sibelius. That whole activation flow is going to get changed, even down to the quick start and reviewing that workflow. To the point, actually, if you haven't used our mobile app, please do. It's fun. That actually has been our test bed for UI redesign. So there's no big ribbon. 7 icons on the top. You can search for any feature and trigger it. All the keyboard shortcuts work. So if you're familiar with Sibelius, you can just sort of dive in. But what you get when you first run it is a nice tutorial series, and it describes how to use the app, and then it just shows you music. It's a very musical experience. We didn't want to sort of here's a file browser. Now what? It's here's some music. Start playing with it, edit it, change it, get used to the program. So we'll bring that methodology to desktop, where the first thing when you run Sibelius will be music, and it will teach you how to use the program. And then when you need to activate, it won't be open Avid link, sign in, find out where your system ID and activation ID are, and it doesn't even tell you where they are, so you've got to go and hunt and all this sort of stuff. That whole workflow is going to get changed.
Yeah.
So we're very keen on fixing that. So fingers crossed we can work on that soon.
Yeah, and I mean, to speak, to the larger, broader field, I think that's where everything is going. It's about discoverability. The old way, you and I are both old enough to remember the old way of where you'd open up the 800-page manual and you'd start doing these tutorials and all. I mean, this is not the way that people, by and large, use software or apps or anything. They just open it up and expect to dive in, and it's up to the manufacturer, the developer, to onboard people as easily, as seamlessly as possible.
Yeah. And it's there's so many millions of ways of learning how to do something these days, and we put sections of the reference into Notebook LM, and it generates a podcast and just teach you how to do something.
I know,
and you can just ask it questions, and it's amazing.
It is amazing.
So there's even an opportunity down the road. We previewed this in Pro Tools a little while ago, where we had a chatbot inside Pro Tools, and you can ask it to do stuff. So you can say, give me a new session, 8 audio tracks, 2 MIDI, go, and it just did it. So if we can consider bringing that over to Sibelius, I think that would be quite interesting. But that's more future looking, where that's the trend of the technology trends, really, of the rest of the world, and what we can hook in and bring that sort of relevance into our world.
Yeah. Anything at NAMM in particular, just tying it back to where we are right now, that has surprised or interested you? I know you said you hadn't gotten around too much to see.
Yeah, I haven't gone around the show yet.
Okay.
No, it's the last day.
Yeah.
So hoping to today.
Good.
I think there's an awful lot of ecosystem play that people are doing.
Yeah.
We teamed up with Native Instruments on the Pro Tools side last year, and that's going to open up amazing avenues for us. There's lots of partnerships. I think people have realized they can't do everything, or if they do that thing that they really want to do, they've suddenly got 5 competitors for that one feature. So there's speech to text coming in Pro Tools soon that we're going to implement, but there's a bunch of companies that have dedicated people, the whole companies, just to do that one thing, and we're going to do it and then move on to something else. But we've got to balance that really well with partnering with the right people and bringing workflows that enhance what we already do, or even move out into other sectors around our own place where Sibelius sits.
It seems like the perfect approach, actually, because you're right. Like, everybody expects the software sometimes, or not everybody, but some people expect the software to do everything, to be everything to all people. And you're just all these developers development teams they're fairly small, and there's so much that Sibelius can do already. But at a certain point, everybody's using multiple tools for multiple things, and so to be aware of what other people are doing in a very specific niche that you can then leverage and partner, and then when those people need a software like Sibelius, they can, there's some cross-pollination happening there.
And all of us have got small teams.
At
the various different notation companies. We're not hundreds of people.
We tend to forget that sometimes.
So we can't do everything.
Right.
But we want to make sure that we're doing the important things that are going to make people get the best out of our applications and the ecosystem that we've built. And so it's still really fun after all these years.
I'm happy to hear that.
We're still cranking out the releases, and I think it'll be our 62nd release the last 10 years or something. So it's been really
that's
fun.
Great. Well, I would venture to say, if it isn't fun, you shouldn't be doing it anymore. So I'm glad to hear that it's fun. It's definitely fun to talk to you. Sam Butler from Avid and Sibelius. I wish you all the best for the rest of the show and the rest of the year. And I'm sure we'll be talking again soon.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks, Philip.
Thanks, Sam. That's why it went dark.
Do you need to do the clap thing?
All right.
You should get a score in those clapperboard.
I should. That would be helpful. I should get a lot of things to help in my amateur podcasting experience. But
this is all part of it.
I know. It is. All right. It's all part of the fun here.